The first silver coin slipped from Kaela's calloused palm and clinked against the wooden counter, and she stared at it as though it might vanish like morning frost under the sun. She had worked for 3 weeks at the sawmill, hauling logs that would have required 2 human men to lift, operating the great blade with a precision that surprised even herself, and sweeping sawdust until her arms ached in ways that battle training never made them ache. Every evening, she had returned to her makeshift camp in the woods beyond the mill, certain that when payment day came, there would be excuses, delays, or worse, the back of a hand and a command to leave before the town guard arrived. That was how it had always been. Orcs did not receive honest wages. They received suspicion, stones, and if they were fortunate, stale bread tossed like one might feed a stray dog. But Isaac Thornton had placed 6 silver coins in her hand, counted them out one by one, and said, "Good work, Kaela. Same time tomorrow." Now those coins rested on the counter between them, and Kaela could not stop the burning behind her eyes or the tightness in her throat. She tried to speak, to thank him, to say anything at all, but the words tangled with the sob that wanted to escape. Her tusks pressed against her lower lip as she bit down hard, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. But her vision blurred and the first tear traced a hot path down her green cheek. Isaac's weathered face softened with an expression she could not quite name. Pity, perhaps, but not the cruel kind she had seen before. Something gentler. He was a man of perhaps 40 summers, with brown hair that had begun to silver at the temples and hands scarred from decades of working with wood and blade. His eyes were a warm brown, like the heartwood of oak, and they held a steadiness that had made her dare to trust him when he offered her work. "First honest wage?" he asked quietly. Kaela nodded, not trusting her voice. She carefully gathered the coins, clutching them so tightly the edges bit into her palm. The weight of them felt impossible. 6 silver coins, enough for food that was not scavenged or stolen, enough for a blanket that was not torn and threadbare. Enough to prove that she was not simply a monster to be driven away, but a person whose labor had value. "I am sorry," she managed, her voice rough. "I did not mean to, nothing to apologize for," Isaac said firmly. He gestured to the chair near his desk, an old thing with one leg shorter than the others. "Sit a moment. Catch your breath." She hesitated. The sawmill office was small, just a corner of the main building partitioned off with rough planks. Through the gaps, she could see the great blade, silent now in the evening light, and the stacks of fresh-cut lumber waiting to be loaded onto wagons. The smell of pine and cedar filled the air, mixed with the earthy scent of the river that powered the mill's wheel. It was not a grand place, but it was honest work, and that made it more precious than any palace. Kaela sat, still holding the coins. Isaac moved to a small shelf and retrieved a tin cup and a jug of water. He poured and handed it to her without comment, then leaned against his desk, giving her space while not abandoning her to her emotions alone. She drank, grateful for something to do with her hands other than clutch her wages like a miser. The water was cool and clean, drawn from the well that morning. When she had emptied the cup, she set it down carefully and finally met Isaac's eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For the work, for paying me fairly." "For not," she stopped, unsure how to articulate the absence of cruelty, the shocking normalcy of being treated as though she were simply another worker. "You earned it," Isaac said simply. "You work harder than any man I have had here in 5 years. You are strong, careful, and you listen to instruction. Why would I not pay you?" "Because I am an orc," Kaela said bluntly. "Because your neighbors likely tell you I will murder you in your sleep and burn the mill to the ground. Because every town I have passed through has made it clear my kind is not welcome." Isaac was quiet for a moment, considering. My neighbors say a lot of things, he admitted, but I judge a person by what they do, not what they are born as. You have been nothing but respectful and hardworking. That is what matters to me. Kaela felt another wave of emotion threaten to overwhelm her, but this time it was gratitude mixed with something dangerously close to hope. She had been alone for so long, driven from her clan for refusing to participate in raids, wandering the frontier in search of something she could not quite name. Acceptance, perhaps. A place where her strength could be used for building rather than destroying. I will not let you down, she said, and it was a vow. Isaac smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. I know you will not. Now get yourself some rest. Tomorrow we have a big order to fill for the new barn on the Whitley farm. Kaela stood, tucking the coins carefully into the small leather pouch she wore on her belt. It had been empty for so long that the weight of it now felt strange against her hip. She paused at the door, looking back at Isaac. Why did you give me a chance, she asked, when no one else would? Isaac met her gaze steadily. My father taught me that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. I have tried to live by that. He paused, then added more quietly, and I have known what it is like to be judged unfairly. Perhaps not to the extent you have, but enough to understand. Kaela nodded slowly, committing his words to memory. Then she stepped out into the evening, where the sun was beginning to set beyond the pine trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The air was cool and carried the promise of autumn. She breathed it in deeply, feeling lighter than she had in months. Her camp was a 20-minute walk into the forest, far enough from the mill and the nearby town that she would not frighten anyone, but close enough to make the journey to work each day manageable. She had built a simple shelter from fallen branches and her worn cloak, creating just enough protection from rain and wind. A circle of stones marked where she built her small fires, and her few possessions a bedroll, a waterskin, a knife, and now 6 silver coins represented everything she owned in the world. That night, she did not build a fire. Instead, she walked the 3 miles to the trading post at the crossroads, a ramshackle building that served the scattered farms and homesteads in the area. The proprietor, a wiry man named Garrett, stiffened when she entered, his hand moving toward the club he kept beneath the counter. I have money, Kaela said quickly, holding up 2 of her silver coins where he could see them. I wish to buy supplies. Garrett's eyes narrowed, but he did not reach for the club. What kind of supplies? Food, Kaela said. Bread, cheese, dried meat if you have it, and a blanket. He named prices that she suspected were higher than what he charged human customers, but she did not argue. She was too grateful to be allowed to purchase anything at all. She left with a small sack of provisions and a wool blanket that was thin but clean, and she felt wealthy beyond measure. Back at her camp, she spread the blanket over her bedroll and ate bread and cheese that she had bought with her own money, earned through her own labor. The simple meal tasted better than any feast. She lay down on her improved bedding and looked up at the stars through the canopy of trees, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she allowed herself to imagine a future that extended beyond simple survival. Perhaps she could save enough to rent a room somewhere. Perhaps Isaac would continue to employ her through the winter. Perhaps this fragile beginning could grow into something stable and real. She fell asleep with the leather pouch of remaining coins tucked safely against her chest, and she did not dream of battle or flight, but of the steady rhythm of the sawmill blade and the smell of fresh cut wood. The days that followed settled into a pattern that felt almost miraculous in its ordinariness. Kaela arrived at the sawmill each morning as the sun rose, and she worked until evening, taking a brief rest at midday to eat whatever simple meal she had prepared. Isaac treated her no differently than he would any employee, offering corrections when needed, praise when earned, and maintaining a professional distance that gradually became comfortable familiarity. She learned the rhythms of the work. The way certain woods required different handling. Pine was soft and forgiving. Oak was stubborn and demanded respect. Cedar released its aromatic oils and left her hands smelling of forests. She learned to read the grain, to anticipate how a log would split, to make adjustments to the blade's angle that saved time and reduced waste. Isaac noticed her aptitude and began teaching her more complex aspects of the trade. How to identify quality lumber, how to price orders fairly, how to maintain the equipment so it would last for years. He spoke to her as he would to an apprentice, and Kaela absorbed every word, hungry for knowledge that could make her more valuable, more secure in her position. The other workers at the sawmill, there were 3 men who came and went, hired for specific jobs, treated her with wary courtesy. They did not befriend her, but neither did they sabotage her work or spread vicious rumors. It was a cold peace, but Kaela had learned to appreciate even that small mercy. On her 4th week, Isaac invited her to take her midday meal inside the office rather than outside by the woodpile where she usually sat. It was raining, a steady autumn downpour that turned the mill yard to mud and made outside dining miserable. "No sense in you catching a chill," he said, gesturing to the chair. "I have stew from this morning, plenty to share." Kaela hesitated at the threshold, aware of the presumption of entering his private space, but the rain was cold and her cloak was already soaked. She accepted, settling into the chair while Isaac ladled thick vegetable stew into 2 wooden bowls. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the sound of rain on the roof providing a soothing backdrop. Then Isaac spoke, his tone casual but his eyes thoughtful. "You said you came from a clan. Do you mind if I ask what happened?" Kaela set down her spoon carefully, considering how much to reveal. But Isaac had been nothing but fair with her, and perhaps he deserved the truth. "I was raised in the Ironjaw clan," she said. "We lived in the mountains to the north, beyond the border settlements. My father was a warrior, my mother a scout. They trained me to fight from the time I could walk." "You must have been skilled," Isaac observed. "I was," Kaela admitted without arrogance, simply stating fact. "But I did not have the stomach for raiding. The Ironjaw way is to take what we need from human settlements: food, weapons, supplies. We were taught that humans were weak, and that their abundance was meant to be claimed by the strong." She paused, remembering the turning point. "When I was 17, I participated in my first raid. We attacked a farmstead at night. The family tried to fight back a man and his wife, 2 children. We killed them all." Her voice went flat. "The children were young, younger than I was when I began training. And I looked at them, at what we had done, and I could not reconcile it with honor." Isaac listened without interrupting, his expression grave. "I told my father I would not participate in raids anymore. That I would hunt, scout, do any other task, but I would not kill people defending their homes and children. He said I was weak, that I had shamed the clan." Kaela's hands tightened around her bowl. "The elders gave me a choice: participate in the next raid or be exiled. I chose exile." "How long ago was that?" Isaac asked quietly. 3 years. "I have been wandering ever since, taking odd jobs when I can, stealing when I must, always moving before I am driven out or worse." She met his eyes. "Until I came here, until you gave me a chance." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, digesting her story. Then he said, "What you did took courage. It is easier to follow the path laid out for you, even when you know it is wrong, than to stand against your entire community." "It has been a lonely courage," Kaela said, the admission escaping before she could stop it. "Loneliness is often the price of integrity," Isaac said, but it does not have to be permanent." Something in his tone made Kaela look up sharply, but Isaac had returned his attention to his stew, and she could not read his expression. They finished their meal and returned to work, but his words stayed with her. That evening, as she prepared to leave, Isaac called her back. "I have been thinking," he said. "Winter is coming, and your camp in the woods will not be comfortable when the snow starts. There is a small room in the back of the mill where I used to store supplies before I built the new shed. It is not much, but it has a roof and walls and a small stove. You are welcome to use it if you like. No charge, consider it part of your wages." Kaela stared at him, once again rendered speechless by his casual generosity. A room, walls and a roof and a stove. It seemed too much, too generous, and her instinct was to refuse, to maintain her independence and not owe anyone more than she already did. But the practical part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive through 3 years of wandering, knew that winter in a forest camp could be deadly. And more than that, she was tired of being alone, of sleeping with one eye open, of never fully relaxing because there was always the possibility of discovery and violence. "I accept," she said. "Thank you again." Isaac smiled. "Good, I will help you move your things tomorrow. For tonight, at least gather your bedroll and blanket and settle in. No point in spending another night in the cold if you do not have to." Kaela made the journey to her camp quickly, gathering her few possessions with practiced efficiency. The shelter she had built would return to the forest, reclaimed by nature, and that felt appropriate. She was moving forward, not clinging to temporary refuges. The room at the back of the sawmill was small, perhaps 10 feet square, with a single window and a door that closed securely. The stove was old but functional, and there was a wooden platform that could serve as a bed frame. Isaac had already placed a small load of firewood beside the stove and lit it, so the room was warming when Kaela entered with her belongings. "There is a well just outside, and you are welcome to use the washroom during the day," Isaac said, standing in the doorway. "I know it is not much, but it is perfect," Kaela interrupted, and her voice was fierce with sincerity. "It is more than I have had in years. Thank you." Isaac nodded, looking pleased. "Well then, I will leave you to settle in. Good night, Kaela." "Good night, Isaac." She closed the door after he left and stood in the center of her new room, turning slowly to take it all in. Her room, her space. Somewhere she could close a door and be safe and warm. The emotions that had threatened earlier returned, but this time she let a few tears fall, because she was alone and they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than despair. She spread her bedroll on the platform, added her new blanket, and built up the fire in the stove until the room was comfortably warm. Then she sat on her bed, watching the flames through the stove's small window, and felt something inside her chest that had been clenched tight for 3 years begin to very slowly unfurl. As autumn deepened into the beginning of winter, Kaela's life took on a quality she had never experienced before: routine. She woke each morning in her warm room, washed with water from the well, and began her work at the mill. She ate her midday meal with Isaac in his office, and they talked about everything and nothing: the quality of the wood, the demands of various customers, the weather, and occasionally deeper topics about their pasts and their hopes. She learned that Isaac was a widower. His wife, Margaret, had died of fever 6 years ago, and they had never had children. He had poured himself into the sawmill after her death, building it into a successful enterprise that served the entire region. He was respected in town, though Kaela noted that he seemed to have few close friends. He was a private man, self-sufficient and somewhat solitary, which perhaps explained why her own isolation resonated with him. For her part, Kaela found herself sharing more about her life than she had ever intended. She told him about her mother, who had been the finest tracker in the Ironjaw clan, and who had tried in her own way to understand Kaela's position, even if she could not support it openly. She told him about the beauty of the northern mountains, the way the snow capped the peaks even in summer, and how her people's songs echoed through the valleys at night. "You ever miss it?" Isaac asked one day. "Your clan, I mean, despite everything." Kaela considered the question honestly. "I miss belonging somewhere. I miss knowing my place and purpose, even if I disagreed with what that purpose was. But do I miss the clan itself? No, I cannot miss a place that required me to compromise my principles to remain." "That is a healthy perspective," Isaac said. "Though I imagine it is easier to say than to feel." "Most truths are," Kaela agreed. It was around this time that Kaela began to notice the way her heart beat a little faster when Isaac smiled at her. The way she looked forward to their midday conversations more than any other part of her day. The way his voice, steady and warm, had become a source of comfort that she craved. She told herself it was simply gratitude, the natural affection one feels for someone who has shown unexpected kindness. But as the days passed and the feeling grew stronger rather than fading, she was forced to acknowledge the truth: she was developing feelings for Isaac that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. It was impossible, of course. He was human, she was an orc. He was her employer, she was his worker. He was a respected member of the community, she was a barely tolerated outsider. And more than any of that, he had loved his wife and likely still mourned her. The idea that he might look at Kaela as anything other than a capable employee was absurd. But the heart, Kaela was learning, did not consult logic before forming attachments. She kept her feelings carefully hidden, maintaining the same professional demeanor she had always shown. But in the privacy of her room at night, she allowed herself to imagine impossible things. Conversations that went beyond the surface. Touches that lingered. A future where she was not alone. Winter arrived in earnest, bringing snow that blanketed the mill yard and icicles that hung from the eaves like crystal spears. The work slowed somewhat, as roads became difficult to navigate and customers delayed their orders until spring. But there was still plenty to do: equipment to maintain, existing stock to organize, and a large order for a merchant in the next county that kept them busy. One morning, Kaela arrived to find Isaac struggling with the mill's water wheel. Ice had formed on the paddles overnight, and the mechanism was jammed. "Careful," she called, seeing him lean precariously over the edge to reach the ice. "Let me help." She waded into the shockingly cold water without hesitation, her greater height and strength allowing her to reach the problematic ice and break it free. Together, they cleared the wheel and got it moving again, but by the time they finished, they were both soaked and shivering. "Inside, quickly," Isaac said through chattering teeth, "before we freeze solid." They hurried to the office where Isaac built up the fire to a roaring blaze. Kaela's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak, and her fingers had gone numb. Isaac pressed a cup of hot tea into her hands and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You should not have gone into the water," he scolded gently. "You could have caught your death." "You were about to fall in trying to reach it," Kaela pointed out. "At least I did it on purpose." Isaac laughed despite himself. "Fair point." He sat beside her, his own blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and they huddled near the fire in companionable misery. As the warmth gradually returned to her limbs, Kaela became acutely aware of how close they were sitting. She could see the details of his face: the small scar above his left eyebrow, the laugh lines around his eyes, the gray threaded through his brown hair. He smelled of wood smoke and pine, familiar and comforting. Isaac turned his head and met her eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them. A recognition, an acknowledgement of something unspoken. Kaela's breath caught, and she saw Isaac's expression shift, becoming almost uncertain. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "We should get you into dry clothes. There are some old shirts of mine in the storage room. They will be too large, but better than staying wet." The moment passed, but it left Kaela's heart pounding. Had she imagined it, that flicker of something in his eyes? Or had it been real and he had simply chosen to retreat from it? She changed into one of Isaac's shirts, which indeed hung like a tent on her frame, and tried to convince herself that she had imagined the whole thing. But the memory of his eyes meeting hers, the sudden tension in the air, refused to be dismissed. The next few days were awkward in a way they had not been before. Both of them seemed to be carefully maintaining distance, as though afraid that getting too close might ignite something neither was ready to acknowledge. Their conversations remained friendly but became shorter, less personal. They worked side by side but avoided unnecessary contact. Kaela hated it. She hated the new stiffness between them, the loss of the easy companionship they had built. But she did not know how to fix it without addressing the thing that had caused it, and she was terrified of doing that. The situation resolved itself unexpectedly on a cold December afternoon. A man from town arrived at the mill, a merchant named Harold who had placed several orders over the past months. He was affable enough to Isaac, but had always treated Kaela with barely concealed distaste. On this day, he arrived to pick up an order and found Kaela alone in the mill yard, as Isaac had gone to the town to arrange payment with another customer. "Where is Thornton?" Harold demanded. "In town," Kaela replied politely. "He should return within the hour." "Your order is ready. I can help you load it." Harold's face twisted. "I will not have an orc touching my lumber. Who knows what foulness you might contaminate it with?" Kaela kept her expression neutral, though the insult stung. "As you wish. You may wait for Isaac to return, or you may load it yourself." "I will do neither," Harold snapped. "I will tell Thornton that his decision to employ your kind is going to cost him business. Decent people do not want to associate with anyone who treats orcs as though they are civilized." He turned to leave, but his parting shot drifted back to Kaela. "He must be desperate indeed to lower himself to your level. Perhaps his mind has gone soft with age and loneliness." Kaela stood very still, absorbing the words, feeling them settle into the familiar spaces where all the other slurs and insults had accumulated over the years. She told herself it did not matter, that Harold was one man and his opinion was worthless. But it did matter, because he had voiced the thing she feared most, that Isaac's kindness to her would damage his reputation, cost him business, make his life harder. That she was a burden he bore out of pity or stubbornness, not because he truly valued her. When Isaac returned an hour later, she told him about Harold's visit in a flat, factual tone. Isaac's face darkened with anger. "He had no right to speak to you that way," he said. "I will make it clear to him that if he cannot treat my employees with respect, he can take his business elsewhere." "You will lose customers," Kaela said quietly. "Then I will lose customers," Isaac replied firmly. "I am not going to tolerate people treating you like that, Kaela. You have as much right to respect as anyone." "Do I?" The question escaped before she could stop it, raw and vulnerable. "I am an orc, Isaac. I know what people think of me, what they think of you for employing me. Harold is not wrong that I damage your reputation." Isaac stepped closer, his eyes intense. "Harold is absolutely wrong. You have been the best worker I have ever had. You are skilled, dedicated, and honest. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool, and I do not care about the opinions of fools." "But you should care," Kaela insisted, her voice rising despite her efforts to control it. "You have built a life here, a business, a place in the community. I am a wanderer, an exile. Eventually, I will have to move on and you will still be here and people will remember that you harbored an orc. That stain does not wash away easily. Is that what you think you are? Isaac asked, and his voice was suddenly soft. A stain. Kaela looked away, unable to meet his eyes. I think I am a complication you do not need. Isaac reached out and gently turned her face back toward him, his hand warm against her green skin. Kaela, look at me. She did, reluctantly, and saw something in his expression that made her heart stutter. You are not a complication, he said. You are not a burden. You are, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. You have become important to me, more important than I intended when I first hired you, more important than is probably wise. Kaela's breath caught. What are you saying? Isaac's hand dropped away from her face, but he did not step back. I am saying that I look forward to seeing you every morning, that I find excuses to extend our midday conversations. That I notice things about you, the way you hum while you work, the way you tilt your head when you are thinking, the way your eyes light up when you laugh. I am saying that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just an employee and became someone I care about deeply. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, standing in the mill yard with snow beginning to fall around them. Kaela's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Isaac could hear it. I am an orc, she whispered, as though he might have forgotten. I know, Isaac said simply. I do not care. Your community will care. They already do. Then let them, Isaac said. I have lived my life trying to be respectable, trying to fit into the expectations others set for me. And I was content with that, until you arrived and reminded me that contentment is not the same as happiness. Kaela shook her head, even as hope bloomed dangerously in her chest. You loved your wife. You still wear your wedding ring. How can you? I did love Margaret, Isaac interrupted. I will always love her memory. But she has been gone for 6 years, Kaela, and she would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone out of some sense of obligation to the past. His voice softened. I think she would have liked you. She always admired people who stood by their principles, even when it cost them. Tears were threatening again, but this time they were not born of despair. I care for you too, Kaela admitted, her voice breaking slightly. More than I should, more than I ever intended. But Isaac, there is no future in this. You are human, I am an orc. The world will not accept us. The world does not have to accept us, Isaac said. We just have to accept each other. He took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her skin. I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I am just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe we could be something more than employer and employee, something more than friends, that maybe we could build something together, despite everything stacked against us. Kaela looked down at their joined hands as human, hers green and slightly larger, both marked by honest work. It seemed impossible. It seemed doomed. It seemed like the most terrifying risk she had ever contemplated. But when she looked back up at Isaac's face, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, she found herself nodding. I will consider it, she whispered. Isaac smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through winter clouds. That is all I ask. He released her hands, stepping back to a more appropriate distance, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The awkwardness of the past few days was gone, replaced by a new awareness that was both exciting and terrifying. They returned to work, but the world felt different now. Full of possibility. That night, alone in her room, Kaela let herself fully acknowledge the depth of her feelings for Isaac. She loved him. It was a simple, terrifying truth. She loved his kindness, his integrity, his quiet strength. She loved the way he saw her as a person rather than a monster. She loved his rare smiles and his patient teaching and the way he made her feel safe. But love was not enough to overcome centuries of prejudice and hate. She knew that. She had seen what happened to orcs and humans who tried to build bridges. They were destroyed by both sides, cast out and condemned. Was she willing to risk that? Was Isaac? The questions kept her awake long into the night, and when she finally slept, her dreams were a confused tangle of hope and fear. The weeks that followed were a careful dance of growing closer while maintaining the appearance of propriety. They continued to work side by side, but now there were moments of deliberate contact, hands brushing as they moved lumber, shoulders touching as they reviewed orders, eyes meeting and holding for a beat longer than necessary. They talked more openly about their feelings, though always in the privacy of the mill when no one else was around. Isaac told her about the loneliness of the years after his wife's death, the way he had buried himself in work to avoid feeling the emptiness. Kaela told him about the desperate hope she had carried through 3 years of wandering, the belief that somewhere in the world there must be a place she could belong. "I think I have found it," she said one evening as they sat in his office, the day's work complete. "Here, with you." Isaac reached across the desk and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not as an employee, though you can certainly continue working if you wish, but as," he paused, searching for the right words, "as my partner. In the mill, in my life, in whatever form that takes." Kaela's chest felt tight. "People will not accept it. Some will not," Isaac agreed. "But others might surprise us, and ultimately this is our life. We get to decide how we live it. What about your business?" "If people refuse to buy from you, then I will find new customers," Isaac said firmly. "Or I will scale back and focus on what I can handle alone. Or I will sell and we will go somewhere new. Kaela, I have money saved. I have options. What I do not have is another chance at happiness if I let fear drive you away." The certainty in his voice, the willingness to sacrifice for her, made Kaela's decision suddenly clear. She had spent 3 years running, trying to find a place where she would not be a burden or a danger. But Isaac was offering her something different, a place where she could be fully herself, loved and valued, even if the world disapproved. She stood, still holding his hand, and pulled him to his feet. They stood face to face, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, see the rapid beat of his pulse at his throat. "I am staying," she said. "If you truly want me, I am staying." Isaac's face transformed with joy. He raised his free hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently over her green skin. "I truly want you, more than I have wanted anything in a very long time." Kaela leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly to savor the sensation. When she opened them again, Isaac was watching her with an expression of such tenderness that it made her breath catch. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Kaela nodded, not trusting her voice. Isaac leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she remained still, waiting. When his lips finally met hers, it was gentle and tentative, a question more than a declaration. Kaela answered by pressing closer, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened gradually, becoming more confident as they learned the shape and taste of each other. Kaela's tusks made the angle slightly different than it might have been with another human, but Isaac adapted without hesitation, finding the position that worked for both of them. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. Isaac rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I," Kaela whispered back. They stood like that for a long moment, simply holding each other, before the practical needs of the world reasserted themselves. It was late, and they both needed rest before the next workday. But as Kaela returned to her room that night, she felt lighter than she had in years. She had not simply found work or shelter, she had found a home, a place where she was wanted for herself, not despite what she was, but including all of it. The happiness was so intense it was almost frightening. She had learned long ago that good things were often temporary, ripped away by circumstance or cruelty. But she pushed the fear aside and chose to trust in this moment, this feeling, this man who had looked past every reason to reject her and chosen to care. They kept their relationship quiet at first, not hiding it exactly, but not advertising it either. There seemed to be no point in inviting trouble before they had to. To the outside world, Kaela remained Isaac's employee. And if she happened to live on the property and spend time with him in the evenings, well, that could be easily explained by convenience and the isolation of the mill. But secrets have a way of emerging, especially in small communities where everyone knows everyone else's business. The revelation came in late January, when a late winter storm damaged several roofs in the nearby town. Isaac received a large order for replacement beams and planks, work that needed to be completed quickly before more snow arrived. He and Kaela worked long hours to fill the order, and one evening, exhausted and focused only on getting home, they walked together toward the mill with their arms around each other, a casual intimacy born of tiredness and affection. They did not notice the man on horseback until he called out, "Thornton, is that you?" Isaac and Kaela stepped apart quickly, but the damage was done. The man was Gerald, a farmer who lived a few miles from the mill and who had always been friendly with Isaac. He rode closer, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. Isaac and the orc woman standing close together, clearly comfortable with each other in a way that suggested familiarity beyond a professional relationship. "Gerald," Isaac said evenly, "what brings you out in this weather?" Gerald's gaze moved from Isaac to Kaela and back again, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something harder. "I was coming to discuss an order for new fence posts, but perhaps this is not a good time." "We can talk now," Isaac said. "Come inside." But Gerald shook his head, his mouth thinning into a disapproving line. "I think I will take my business elsewhere, Thornton. I may not be an educated man, but I know unnatural when I see it." He rode away without another word, and Isaac and Kaela stood in the snow, watching him disappear into the gathering darkness. "It has begun," Kaela said quietly. Isaac's jaw was tight. "Yes, but we knew it would eventually." They went inside, but the joy of the evening had been tarnished. Kaela could not stop thinking about Gerald's expression, the disgust and judgment in his eyes. She had seen that look countless times before, directed at her simply for existing. But this was different this time. That contempt would also fall on Isaac, and the knowledge sat like a stone in her stomach. Over the next week, the news spread through the community with the speed of wildfire. Isaac received visits from several townspeople, some curious, others hostile. A few were surprisingly supportive, an elderly widow named Elsa, who told Isaac that love was too rare to waste on prejudice. A young farmer named Peter, who admitted he had always thought the old stories about orcs were exaggerated, but most reactions ranged from disapproval to outright anger. The minister from the town church came to lecture Isaac about the sanctity of staying with one's own kind. The mayor, a pompous man named Frederick, warned that Isaac's relationship could hurt the town's reputation, and suggested he might want to reconsider his choices. Several customers canceled their orders, and the man who operated the trading post told Isaac that Kaela was no longer welcome to shop there. Through it all, Isaac remained calm and firm. He did not argue or try to justify himself. He simply stated that his personal life was his own business, and that he would continue to employ Kaela and spend time with her as he saw fit. But Kaela watched the toll it took on him. The tightness around his eyes, the weariness in his voice when yet another person came to express their disapproval. He was being ostracized from a community he had been part of for decades, all because of her. One evening, after a particularly ugly confrontation with a group of men who had come to warn Isaac that he was endangering the town by housing a dangerous orc, Kaela made a decision. "I should leave," she said once the men had gone. "Isaac, this is destroying your life. Your business, your friendships, your standing in the community. You are losing everything because of me." Isaac, who had been staring into the fire with a grim expression, looked up sharply. "No, listen to me," Kaela pleaded. "I can go somewhere else, start over again. You can tell people I left, that you came to your senses. In time, they will forgive you and things can go back to normal." "I do not want normal," Isaac said, standing and crossing to where she sat. "I want you, and I am not going to let a bunch of narrow-minded cowards dictate how I live my life." "But you are suffering because of me. I am suffering because people are choosing prejudice over compassion," Isaac interrupted. "That is not your fault, Kaela. You have done nothing wrong. You have worked hard, been respectful, harmed no one. The problem is not you, it is them." Kaela shook her head, tears threatening. "But knowing that does not change the reality. You are losing customers, friends, respect. I am losing people who never truly respected me in the first place," Isaac said. "True respect does not come with conditions. True friendship does not evaporate the moment I make a choice others disapprove of." He took her hands in his. "Kaela, listen to me. I would rather have you and a smaller business than all the success in the world without you. I would rather be condemned by this entire town than live another day without you in my life. Do you understand?" "I am trying to," Kaela whispered, "but I have never been worth this kind of sacrifice before." "Then it is time you learned that you are," Isaac said firmly. He pulled her into his arms and she went, resting her head against his shoulder. "We will get through this. It will be hard, but we will manage, together." Kaela wanted desperately to believe him, and held in his embrace, hearing the steady beat of his heart and feeling the strength of his arms around her. She almost could. The winter was difficult. Business at the mill slowed dramatically as more customers took their orders elsewhere. Isaac dipped into his savings to buy supplies and keep things running, but Kaela could see the strain it caused. She worked harder than ever, taking on additional tasks and finding ways to make the mill more efficient, as though sheer effort could compensate for the lost business. In town, the atmosphere toward both of them was coldly hostile. Kaela stopped going entirely after an incident where a group of young men threw stones at her and called her vile names. Isaac filed a complaint with the town guard, but nothing was done. The message was clear: orcs had no protection under the law, and those who associated with them could not expect better treatment. The isolation was hard on both of them, but especially on Isaac, who had lived his entire life as part of a community. Kaela had long experience with being an outcast, but for him, it was new and painful. She watched him struggle with it, saw the moments of doubt and grief, and hated that she was the cause. But there were bright spots too. Elsa, the elderly widow, began making regular visits to the mill, bringing food and gossip and cheerful conversation. She treated Kaela with casual kindness, as though there were nothing remarkable about an orc and a human being in love. "My late husband was from the southern provinces," she told Kaela one afternoon. "People here thought I was crazy to marry a foreigner, said our children would be confused and lost, but we had 43 happy years together and our children are fine." She patted Kaela's arm. "Love is love, dear. The people who matter will understand that." Peter, the young farmer, also proved to be an unexpected ally. He started bringing his business to Isaac exclusively, even though it meant traveling farther than he needed to. "My father fought in the border wars," he told Isaac. "Killed orcs, boasted about it my whole childhood. But when he was dying, he told me he regretted it. Said he had nightmares about the faces of the ones he killed, wondered if they had families waiting for them, made me promise not to carry on the hate." He glanced at Kaela. "Seems like keeping that promise means supporting people like you too." These small kindnesses mattered more than Kaela could express. They were proof that not everyone was ruled by prejudice, that change was possible, even if it came slowly. As winter began to give way to early spring, Isaac sat her down one evening with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the future, about us." Kaela's stomach tightened with nervousness. "What about us?" "I want to make this official," Isaac said. "I want to marry you, Kaela." The words hung in the air between them, enormous and impossible. "Marry," Kaela repeated faintly. "Yes," Isaac said. "I know it will not be legally recognized, no church or official will perform the ceremony, but we can do it ourselves, make our own vows. I want you to be my wife in truth, not just in the privacy of our own hearts." Kaela's mind reeled. Marriage, a public declaration of their commitment, even more bold and defiant than simply living together. It would seal Isaac's ostracism from the community, mark him permanently as other. "Isaac, if we do this, there is no going back. People who might eventually forgive you for a dalliance with an orc will never accept a marriage." "I do not want their acceptance at that price," Isaac said. "I want you. I want a life with you. And I want to stand before whatever witnesses we can find and declare that openly." Kaela searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation, but found only certainty. He meant this. He truly wanted to bind his life to hers, consequences be damned. "Yes," she said, the word emerging as barely more than a whisper. "Yes, I will marry you." Isaac's face split into a wide smile, and he pulled her into a kiss that was joyous and fierce. When they broke apart, both were laughing through tears. "I love you," Isaac said. "I should have said it before now, but I love you, Kaela." "I love you too," Kaela replied, and speaking the words aloud felt like breaking through the surface of water after diving deep, a gasp of relief and truth. "I have loved you for longer than I wanted to admit." They spent the evening planning. The ceremony would be simple. They would speak their vows to each other at the mill, witnessed by whatever few friends they had. Elsa immediately volunteered to help when they told her, delighted by the news. Peter said he and his wife would attend. A traveling merchant named Simon, who had never cared about the prejudices of settled communities, promised to be there. It was not the large wedding Isaac might have had if he had chosen a human bride, not the celebration that most people dreamed of. But it was theirs, and that made it perfect. They set the date for the spring equinox, a time of balance and new beginnings. Kaela spent her spare time sewing herself a simple dress from fabric that Elsa had gifted her. She had never owned a dress before and found the process both frustrating and oddly satisfying. Isaac cleaned and repaired the mill until it gleamed, wanting their home to look its best for the occasion. But as the date approached, tensions in the town reached a new height. The minister preached a sermon condemning Isaac and warning that his unnatural union would bring divine punishment on the entire community. The mayor issued a formal statement distancing the town from Isaac's actions. And rumors began to circulate that a group of men were planning to do something to prevent the marriage. "Perhaps we should postpone," Kaela suggested nervously. "Wait until tempers cool." But Isaac shook his head. "No, we have waited long enough. We are doing this." On the morning of the equinox, Kaela woke early, her stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and dread. She washed carefully and dressed in her new gown, A simple creation of green fabric that Elsa had insisted matched her eyes. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up, then stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing herself. She looked like a bride, like a woman about to marry the man she loved, like someone who had a right to happiness and a future. The ceremony was planned for mid-afternoon, giving their small group of guests time to arrive. But around noon, as Kaela was helping Isaac arrange the mill's main room for the ceremony, they heard the sound of horses and raised voices outside. Isaac's expression tightened. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the door. But Kaela followed, unwilling to let him face whatever was coming alone. Outside, a group of about 20 men had gathered in the mill yard. Some she recognized from town: the minister, the mayor, Gerald the farmer, and others who had been vocal in their disapproval. They were armed with clubs and tools, and their faces were set with ugly determination. "Thornton," the mayor called out, "we are here to put an end to this madness. Send the orc away and we can forget this ever happened." "You have no authority here," Isaac replied, his voice calm but hard. "This is my property. Leave." "We are not leaving until that creature is gone," the minister said. "You are courting damnation, Thornton, and we will not stand by and watch." "Then do not watch," Isaac said. "Go home. Mind your own business." "This is our business," Gerald shouted. "You are bringing shame on this entire community. We have tolerated your perversion long enough." Kaela felt her stomach drop. This was not going to end peacefully. She could see it in the set of their shoulders, the weapons in their hands. They had come to drive her away and possibly to hurt Isaac in the process. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Isaac. "I will go," she said clearly. "I do not want violence. I will leave and you can return to your lives." "No," Isaac said sharply, pulling her back. "You are not going anywhere." "Isaac, please," Kaela said desperately. "They will hurt you." "I do not care," Isaac said. "I am not letting them take you from me." The crowd was advancing now, emboldened by their numbers. Kaela felt panic rising. She was strong, she could fight, but there were too many of them, and she did not want to hurt anyone. That would only confirm everything they believed about orcs being violent monsters. But before the situation could escalate further, a new voice cut through the tension. "That is far enough." Everyone turned to see Elsa standing at the edge of the mill yard, leaning on her walking stick but with her chin raised defiantly. Behind her were Peter and his wife, Simon the merchant, and to Kaela's shock, about a dozen other people from the surrounding farms and homesteads. "Elsa, stay out of this," the mayor warned. "I will not," Elsa said firmly. "You men should be ashamed of yourselves, coming here with weapons to threaten two people whose only crime is loving each other." "It is unnatural," the minister protested. "What is unnatural is your cruelty," Peter's wife said, her voice sharp. "Isaac has been nothing but kind and fair to everyone in this community, and from what I have seen, Kaela has done the same. They deserve our support, not this mob." "We have a right to protect our community from monsters," Gerald said. "The only monsters I see here are the ones holding clubs," Simon said dryly. The mayor looked between the two groups, clearly calculating. The anti-Isaac crowd still outnumbered the supporters, but not by as much as they had likely expected. And the presence of witnesses, of people willing to stand publicly in Isaac and Kaela's defense, complicated things. "This is not over, Thornton," the mayor finally said. "You are making enemies you cannot afford." "I am making a life I can be proud of," Isaac replied. "That is worth more than your approval." The crowd broke up slowly, with much muttering and dark looks, but they dispersed. Kaela sagged with relief, only Isaac's steadying hand keeping her upright. When the hostile group had finally left, their supporters came forward. Elsa pulled Kaela into a fierce hug. "Do not you dare let those fools drive you away," she said. "You belong here with Isaac. Do you understand?" Kaela nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Peter clapped Isaac on the shoulder. "We have your back. Not everyone in this region is a bigot." "Thank you," Isaac said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "All of you. This means more than I can say." "Well, we did not come all this way just to chase off troublemakers," Simon said with a grin. "I believe there is a wedding to attend." And there was. Despite the earlier tension, or perhaps because of it, the ceremony felt even more significant. Isaac and Kaela stood in the center of the mill's main room, surrounded by the small group of people who had chosen to support them, and they spoke their vows. There were no official words, no prescribed ceremony. Instead, they simply spoke from the heart. Isaac went first, taking Kaela's hands in his. "Kaela, when you came to me asking for work, I saw someone who needed a chance. But you have given me so much more than I ever gave you. You have given me purpose, joy, and love I never expected to find again. You have reminded me what it means to live with courage and integrity. I promise to stand with you, to build a life with you, to love you for all the days I have left." Kaela's voice shook as she replied, but she forced the words out, needing him to hear them. "Isaac, you gave me the first honest wage I ever earned, and with it, you gave me dignity. You saw me as a person when the world saw only a monster. You offered me not just work, but a home, a place to belong. I promise to honor that gift, to stand with you against whatever comes, to love you with everything I am." There were no rings, such things were luxuries neither could afford. Instead, they each removed a small leather cord they wore and tied them together, binding the strands into a single braid. Isaac fastened it around Kaela's wrist, and she did the same for him. "By our own authority," Isaac said, "in the presence of these witnesses I declare us married." Elsa cheered and the others joined in. There was no grand celebration, no feast or dancing, but there was joy. Pure, defiant, hard-won joy. That night, after their guests had departed, Isaac and Kaela lay together in the room that was now truly theirs, not just his or hers, but shared. They held each other close, marveling at the simple fact that they had reached this moment. "Are you afraid?" Kaela asked softly. "Of what comes next?" Terrified, Isaac admitted, "but also hopeful. We have proven we can weather storms together. Whatever comes, we will face it the same way." Kaela thought about the long road that had brought her here, exile from her clan. Years of wandering, the endless rejection and hostility. And then this unexpected miracle, a man who looked past everything that should have divided them and chose to love her anyway. "I never imagined I could have this," she whispered. "A home, a partner, a future." "Neither did I," Isaac said, "but here we are." "Here we are," Kaela echoed, and she felt the truth of it settle into her bones. This was real, this was hers, and she would fight to protect it. Spring turned to summer, and life at the mill found a new equilibrium. The business did not recover to its former levels. Too many in the town remained hostile, but Isaac's skills and fair prices attracted customers from farther afield, and they made enough to live comfortably. Kaela continued to work alongside him, and together they proved to be an efficient team. The hostility from the town lessened somewhat over time, shifting from active aggression to cold disapproval. There were no more mobs or confrontations, just the steady chill of being outsiders. It was difficult, but bearable. Their small circle of supporters became close friends, a chosen family that mattered more than blood or community. Elsa was a frequent visitor, her tart humor and steadfast loyalty a constant source of comfort. Peter and his wife began bringing their young children to play at the mill, teaching the next generation that orcs were not monsters to be feared. And slowly, carefully, Isaac and Kaela built a life together. They worked, they talked, they laughed, they loved. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they learned how to navigate disagreements with respect and honesty. They discovered each other's quirks and habits: Isaac's tendency to lose track of time when absorbed in a project, Kaela's habit of humming old orc songs while she worked. One warm summer evening, as they sat outside watching the sun set over the river, Kaela turned to Isaac with a question she had been pondering. "You ever regret it, choosing me, knowing what it cost you?" Isaac considered the question seriously, as he always did when she asked difficult things. "I regret that the world made it a choice that came with such costs," he said finally. "I regret that loving you means being cast out from a community I was part of for decades. But do I regret loving you, marrying you, not for a single moment?" He took her hand, his thumb tracing over the braided cord they both still wore. "You are the best thing that has happened to me in years, Kaela. You make me happy in a way I had forgotten was possible. If I had to make the choice again, knowing everything I know now, I would make the same one." Kaela leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I am glad," she said softly, "because I would choose you too, every time." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, and Kaela thought about how far she had come. From an exile with nothing to her name, to a woman with a home, a husband, and a future. It had not been easy. It would probably never be easy, not in a world that still saw orcs and humans as fundamentally incompatible. But it was hers, and that made all the struggle worthwhile. As autumn approached again, marking a full year since Kaela had first arrived at the mill, she and Isaac took stock of their lives. The mill was operating successfully, if on a smaller scale than before. They had food, shelter, and each other. They had a few good friends and the satisfaction of living according to their principles. "We have done well," Isaac said one evening, reviewing their finances. "We are stable, comfortable, even." Kaela looked around their home, the mill that had become so much more than just a workplace. "We have," she agreed, "though I wonder sometimes what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we have built this life here against all odds, but the town still mostly hates us. We are tolerated but not accepted. Is this where we stay forever? Or do we eventually look for somewhere new, somewhere we might face less hostility?" Isaac set down his ledger, giving her his full attention. "What would you want to do?" Kaela thought about it carefully. "Part of me wants to run, to find somewhere easier. But another part of me wants to stay, to prove that we have just as much right to be here as anyone, that love can exist across the boundaries people try to draw." "I feel the same conflict," Isaac admitted, "but I think, for now at least, we stay. We have friends here, a functioning business, a home we have built together. And maybe over time our presence will help change minds. If even a few people learn that their prejudices are wrong, that is worth something." "You are an optimist," Kaela said, but she was smiling. "I have to be," Isaac replied. "Otherwise the world would be too dark to bear." They decided to stay, and as the second year of their marriage progressed, small signs of change began to appear. A few more customers started coming to the mill, willing to overlook Isaac's choice of wife in favor of his quality work. Some of the younger people in town, who had grown up hearing the old prejudices, but had not yet fully internalized them, began treating Kaela with cautious politeness. It was not acceptance, not really. But it was less hostile than before, and that felt like progress. One day in late winter, a young orc woman appeared at the mill. She was thin and exhausted, her clothes ragged, and she approached with the same desperate wariness that Kaela remembered feeling when she first arrived. "Please," the woman said. "I heard there was an orc living here who had found work. I was hoping. I am a good worker, strong. I can do anything you need." Kaela and Isaac exchanged glances. They saw an opportunity not just to help someone in need, but to expand their small circle of acceptance. "What is your name?" Isaac asked gently. "Mira," the woman replied. "Well, Mira, we can use an extra set of hands," Isaac said. "The work is hard, but the pay is fair. Can you start tomorrow?" Mira's eyes widened with disbelief and hope. "You mean it? You will hire me?" "We mean it," Kaela said, understanding exactly what Mira was feeling. "Come, let us get you some food and show you where you can stay." As they helped Mira settle in, giving her the small storage room that Kaela had once occupied, Kaela felt a sense of rightness. They were not just surviving anymore, they were building something larger. A place where orcs and humans could work side by side, where the old hatreds could be challenged by simple daily cooperation. It was a small thing in the grand scheme of the world. One mill, one town, a handful of people choosing kindness over prejudice. But small things could grow, could spread, could become movements. That night, lying in bed with Isaac, Kaela voiced the thought that had been growing in her mind. "We are starting something here," she said. "Something important." "A revolution of radical kindness," Isaac murmured sleepily. Kaela smiled in the darkness. "Something like that." The years continued to pass, and the mill became known throughout the region as a place where good work was valued over the species of the worker. More orcs found their way there, seeking the honest employment that was denied them elsewhere. Isaac and Kaela hired those they could, and helped those they could not employ to find work with the few open-minded farmers and merchants in the area. The town never fully embraced them, but the active hostility faded into grudging tolerance. The younger generation, growing up with Mira and other orcs as familiar fixtures rather than mysterious threats, carried less hatred than their parents. Change was slow, incremental, frustrating, but it was happening. Elsa passed away peacefully in her sleep when Kaela and Isaac had been married for 5 years. They mourned her deeply, but took comfort in the fact that she had lived to see some of the change she believed in. At her funeral, she had left instructions that Kaela should speak, and though it shocked the traditional mourners, Kaela honored her friend with words about courage, acceptance, and the power of choosing love over fear. Peter and his wife had more children, and all of them grew up playing with orc children at the mill, learning that difference was not something to fear. Some of those children, as they grew older, would carry that lesson into the wider world, spreading tolerance in ways that Kaela and Isaac never directly saw, but could sense rippling outward. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac and Kaela renewed their vows in the same spot where they had first married. The crowd of witnesses was larger this time, not just their closest friends, but workers from the mill, customers who had come to respect them, and even a few townspeople who had softened their views over the years. As they spoke their promises again, now enriched by a decade of partnership, Kaela thought back to that day when Isaac had placed 6 silver coins in her hand and changed her entire life. She remembered the disbelief, the tears, the overwhelming gratitude for the simple gift of being paid fairly for honest work. She had thought that moment was the miracle, that the greatest gift Isaac could give her was dignity and a wage, but she had been wrong. The true gift was this: the partnership they had built, the life they had created together, the small but meaningful change they had sparked in the world around them. The gift was love, freely given and received, strong enough to weather prejudice and isolation and fear. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked softly as they stood together after the ceremony, watching their friends celebrate around them. "About how far we have come," Kaela said. "About that first day when you paid me and I wept because I had never been treated with such basic fairness." "You have given me just as much," Isaac said. "More even. You have given me purpose, showed me what it means to live with true courage." Kaela turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "We gave each other a future," she said. "That is the real miracle." Isaac smiled and pulled her close, kissing her with the easy affection of long familiarity. Around them, their friends cheered, and the sound was joyful and full of hope. The world had not changed overnight. Prejudice still existed, would probably always exist in some form. But here, in this small corner of the frontier, they had proven that a different way was possible. That orcs and humans could build lives together, could love each other, could create something beautiful out of the materials of fear and hate. As the celebration continued into the evening, Kaela looked around at the mill, her home, their achievement, the physical manifestation of everything they had fought for. The great blade stood silent in the gathering darkness, ready for another day of work. The stacks of lumber represented orders from all over the region. The small houses they had built for their workers created a tiny community where species did not determine worth. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was good, and it was theirs, and it was proof that change was possible. That night, lying in their bed in the room they had shared for 10 years, Kaela whispered the words that had become a ritual between them, spoken every night before sleep. "I love you." "I love you," Isaac replied, as he always did. And in those simple words lived all the defiance, all the hope, all the stubborn refusal to let the world dictate who they could be and what they could build together. Kaela had held those first honest coins and wept because they represented a chance, a fragile possibility that she might be more than the world said she could be. Now, a decade later, she knew the truth. She was not defined by what the world said, but by the choices she made and the love she shared. She was a worker, a wife, a pioneer in a quiet revolution. She was a woman who had found her home, not in a place but in a person, and who had helped create a space where others like her could find the same. The journey from exile to belonging had been long and hard, marked by tears and struggle and moments of despair. But lying here, safe and warm and loved, Kaela knew with absolute certainty that every difficult step had been worth it. She had wept when she received her first honest wage. She had wept at her wedding. She had wept when Elsa died and when the first orc child was born in their small community, and when Isaac had gotten sick one winter and she had feared losing him. But these tears, the ones that sometimes still came on quiet nights like this, were different. They were not born of despair or disbelief, but of gratitude. Gratitude for the stubborn, brave man sleeping beside her. Gratitude for the life they had built against all odds. Gratitude for every moment of this improbable happiness. Tomorrow, they would wake and return to work. There would be lumber to cut, orders to fill, workers to supervise, and probably some new challenge to face. The world would still hold those who hated and feared, and their small island of acceptance would still be just that small, fragile, requiring constant defense. But they would face it together as they always had, and that made all the difference. Kaela closed her eyes, Isaac steady breathing beside her, and let sleep claim her. Her dreams were peaceful, full of sawdust and sunlight and the steady rhythm of work shared with someone you love. She had found her home. She had found her purpose. She had found her place in the world, not by fitting into the space others carved for her, but by creating her own space through courage, love, and the simple radical act of refusing to believe she was less than fully human, fully person, simply because she had been born orc. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.